Okay, please. Anybody else here?
And second logistical note, if I may, we'll pass around this sign-in sheet. If you don't mind to fill it in. You're very welcome.
We need it for advance purpose.
Anyone else?
Exactly. All right, well, welcome everyone. Thank you again. I should say welcome back. I think we've been very, very active throughout the FFD4 process on the issue of remittances. My name is Courtney Hood. I'm the head of office here for IFAD. It's a real pleasure to welcome you here in our office to this event on the role of remittances in financial inclusion. A big thanks to our co-hosts, to the IOM, to Guatemala, and to the Philippines. This is really an important opportunity on the way up to Seville to look at how to raise ambition on remittances where the issue matters most. And that's really in the sending communities, especially in rural areas. So I think we see the kind of end is in sight. This is a great opportunity to exchange also with our experts. And before we get into our dialogue here today, I would hand over maybe to Pedro Vasconcelos, the manager of the financing facility for remittances at IFAD, and he will take us through our conversation today. So thank you again for joining, and we look forward to our collaboration.
Thank you, Courtney, and good morning, everyone.
Could you please speak loud so I
will
try
to make sure that I come across clearly. So thank you again. I'm Pedro Vasconcelos. That don't know me, manager of the financing facility for remittances. That's a program on this. We also manage the campaign, the International Day of Family Remittances, and particularly specific collaboration that we had with the Philippines and Guatemala all along these years on this particular topic, but more importantly right now as we go to Seville. So this is the third interaction that we have on that. From the latest inclusion in the text, I think there's a lot of progress. As Courtney said, going from very important indicators of cost reduction to really where remittances matter the most, which is in the receiving end, where remittances are received, and particularly rural areas, where we see that the development impact is happening and could be further increased if private sector and public sector given help. So today we're discussing about this. We're close again with our partners, IOM as well, and we have invited Inter-American Dialogue. Manuel Orozco, he's the person who introduced me for this topic. I've been working on this for 20 years.
I was a teenager.
And I had my hair back then, and this is where remittances were discussed as something weird. They were still, do you believe or not in remittances? Sort of discussion. So we will have a little bit of a discussion as well, an introduction from the latest trends. But without further ado, I'd like to initiate this dialogue, and I will invite Guatemala María Luisa Ramírez, Vice Minister of Foreign Affairs, Guatemala, to deliver her remarks. María Luisa.
Muy buenos días para todas y todos. Deseo extender un saludo cordial a ustedes, los delegados presentes en este valioso espacio de diálogo y principalmente con un tema que para Guatemala es de vital importancia. Antes de iniciar con la intervención formal, compartirles una experiencia. Nosotros en el ejercicio fiscal, al inicio del proceso, se hace un espacio que le llamamos presupuesto abierto. Y este año, cuando lo trabajamos en el mes de marzo, una de las exposiciones se basó mucho en el impacto de las remesas. Sin embargo, hasta el momento ese impacto es muy coyuntural y lo que queremos seguir avanzando y trabajando es que sea un impacto más estructural en la vida de las familias de Guatemala. Así que aprovecho la oportunidad para expresar nuestro especial agradecimiento a la delegación de Filipinas, al Fondo Internacional de Desarrollo Agrícola, FIDA, y a la Organización Internacional para las Migraciones, OIM, por la organización de este evento que pone en el centro un tema como lo es el papel de las remesas en la inclusión financiera. Para Guatemala, este tema representa una realidad profundamente tangible, cotidiana y con potencial de transformación, ya que las remesas familiares son hoy por hoy una fuente vital para el bienestar de millones de personas, reflejando un 20% del Producto Interno Bruto de nuestro país. Y ahí es donde vinculo el tema de que representando ese porcentaje es donde nosotros debemos de caminar hacia que las remesas sean un proceso más estructural que coyuntural. Lo cual genera un enorme impacto social y económico para la población, principalmente en las áreas más rurales de nuestro país, en las áreas más desatendidas, como son ciertos departamentos. Guatemala está dividida en 22 departamentos y cuando nosotros vimos el reflejo del impacto de las remesas, estamos en todos los departamentos, unos con mayor porcentaje, otros con menor, pero sin impacto a nivel nacional. A nivel global se estima que más de 1.000 millones de personas están involucradas en el fenómeno de las remesas, ya sea como emisores o como receptores. Solo en el año 2024, alrededor de 647.000 millones de dólares fueron enviados a países de ingresos bajos y medios. Detrás de estas cifras hay historias humanas, madres, padres, hijos y comunidades enteras que hacen uso de estos flujos para cubrir necesidades básicas, mejorar su calidad de vida y construir un futuro con dignidad. En este contexto, no podemos dejar de mencionar que ayer, por ejemplo, se conmemora el Día Mundial de la Seguridad y Salud en el Trabajo. Y en unos días próximos estaremos conmemorando el Día Internacional de los Trabajadores. Estos hitos nos recuerdan la importancia de reconocer y proteger los derechos laborales de todas las personas, incluyendo a quienes integran la diáspora, ya que son ellas y ellos quienes, con su esfuerzo diario, muchas veces en condiciones difíciles, hacen posible el envío de remesas que sostienen economías, fortalecen hogares, expanden oportunidades y generan crecimiento y desarrollo en estas comunidades. Según datos del FIDA, las remesas representan aproximadamente el 60% de los ingresos totales de las familias receptoras. Es decir, si no protegemos a nuestra diáspora, millones de familias perderían su mayor fuente de ingresos, por lo que el rol de estas remesas va más allá de lo inmediato. Como bien se ha señalado en las discusiones preparatorias de la conferencia, los vacíos de financiamiento para el desarrollo sostenible son enormes y crecientes en un contexto global actual cada vez mucho más complejo. Por ello, las remesas juegan un papel crucial para reducir la pobreza en el país. Aunque su uso principal es cubrir necesidades urgentes, se estima que hasta una cuarta parte de los fondos se destinan a actividades generadoras de ingresos y objetivos a largo plazo, como lo son la vivienda, el ahorro, las inversiones, la educación y la salud. Es importante entonces facilitar el acceso a instrumentos financieros apropiados y accesibles para la inversión de la diáspora, ya que no solo permitirá canalizar mejor estos recursos, sino que también fortalecerá la capacidad de nuestras naciones para movilizar capital en regiones que más lo necesitan. Guatemala respalda plenamente las 6 áreas claves identificadas en la campaña internacional sobre las remesas familiares 2025, que deben guiar nuestros esfuerzos colectivos para maximizar el impacto positivo de las remesas, desde la reducción de los costos de envío hacia el fortalecimiento del vínculo entre remesas, inclusión financiera y desarrollo rural. Deseo destacar en este espacio la importancia que atribuimos a la cuarta Conferencia Internacional sobre Financiación para el Desarrollo, que estamos próximos a celebrar en Seville. Esta conferencia representa una oportunidad para reformar la arquitectura financiera global y lo hemos discutido en todas las reuniones preparatorias. Y esa inclusión y esa arquitectura global, regional y nacional, y poder liberar el potencial de las remesas y las inversiones de la diáspora como herramientas para el desarrollo sostenible, que es hacia donde nosotros queremos encaminarnos. Creemos firmemente que si actuamos con visión, voluntad política principalmente y cooperación, podemos transformar las remesas de un acto individual de solidaridad en una poderosa fuerza colectiva para el desarrollo. Debemos de partir desde lo local hacia lo nacional, pero esa fuerza colectiva puede ser el motor para avanzar hacia ese desarrollo sostenible, pero principalmente que permita que ya no se sigan desarraigando de las poblaciones a las personas, no, que permanezcan en sus lugares de origen, pero que permanezcan siendo ciudadanos con una vida digna, que es lo que nosotros vemos en esa transformación. Finalizo mi intervención deseándoles a todas y a todos los presentes una exitosa y provechosa semana de trabajo. Muchísimas gracias.
Gracias, Elisa, por su intervención. On this, I would like to give the floor to the Her Excellency Ambassador Leila para for chargé d'affaires permanente.
Thank you very much, Pedro. Good morning, please. Her Excellency, Maria Luisa Ramirez Coronado de Flores, the former First Vice Minister of the Republic of Guatemala. Distinguished colleagues, good morning. It is a pleasure to welcome you all to this side event on the margins of fourth session of the FFD4 Preparatory Committee to engage in a dialogue on the role of remittances in financial inclusion. The Philippines is proud to organize this event with the Permanent Mission of Guatemala, IFAD, and the IFM, with whom we share a deep appreciation for the transformative impact of remittances on millions of families worldwide. For the Philippines, we reiterate that remittances are more than just financial flows. They are a testament to the important role of migrant workers and their families who serve as a driving force for inclusive growth. In 2024, remittances from overseas Filipinos amounted to $38.34 billion, 3% higher than $37.21 billion in 2023. The remittances last year are the highest recorded to date and account for about 8.3% of the country's GDP. These remittances support households, uplift communities, and fuel investments in education, healthcare, housing, and entrepreneurship. Guided by the GCM and the 2030 Agenda, the Philippine government has long prioritized policies that protect migrant workers and maximize the benefit of remittances. Our national financial inclusion strategy expands banking access, financial literacy, and investment opportunities for remittance receiving families. We work with IFAD and partners to promote digital remittances, lowering costs, and developing financial tools that drive investments for financial inclusion and financial health for the SDGs. As we gather for the ECOSOC Forum on Financial Co-Development and the fourth Preparatory Committee of FFD4, we must ensure that the outcome document of FFD4 reinforces the crucial role of remittances in promoting and advancing the Sustainable Development Agenda. We must ensure that remittances are positioned as catalysts for economic resilience and long-term development. This entails fostering an enabling environment where migrants are protected, remittance costs are lowered, and financial ecosystems and instruments are strengthened to maximize the developmental impacts of remittances on the ground, primarily in developing countries. Just allow me to reiterate the position of the G77 China in this regard, that remittances should not replace ODA, FDI, and other traditional development financing flows for developing countries, such as concessional financing and grants from MPBs, bilateral partners, and IFIs. I'm also pleased to confirm with partners today that Philippine Finance Secretary Ralph Recto will head our delegation to FFD4. His presence underscores our strong commitment to advancing remittances in promoting financial inclusion, social protection, and sustainable development. Through FFD4, let us reaffirm that a strong, actionable commitment on remittances can serve as a concrete deliverable and meaningful contribution to the global financing agenda. The Philippines will, with our partners, continue to advocate for the recognition of remittances as a critical tool for financial inclusion and sustainable development, and call on the international community to support efforts that maximize the transformative potential of remittances worldwide. Again, thank you very much to our partners and to the participants.
Thank you so much, Excellency, for those remarks to realigning the mission. And I think that 8 years ago, across the street, international network remittances was there, and that was thanks to stories that you international aspect now. After that, it will come back on migration 2 years. So thank you so much. Now I would like us to give the floor to our colleagues, our International Organization for Migration, Catalina Devan. She's a representative of the Director General, Senior Director for Partnerships and Policy and Coordination.
Thank you, Pedro. Señora Viceministra, un gusto verla. Her Excellency, Leila Lores Santos, also a pleasure to see you, and to all of you. Good morning. It's a pleasure for IOM to be here, to be partnering with our long-standing partner, IFAD, in this front, and to thank you for inviting us and to have this conversation. We are all here because we approach now the conference in Seville. We are acutely aware of the new landscape in which we are living, and the challenges that brings to financing for development. We know that the SDG financing gap is bigger than ever, standing at 4 trillion annually, and we'll see how it will continue to evolve as in the current situation. And yet, the opportunity of discussing remittances and diaspora investment is something that remains untapped. We see it, of course, it brings an opportunity as a private source of finance that cannot be, and we cannot emphasize that enough. We know that collectively, these flows are estimated to exceed 1 trillion annually to low and middle income countries, and that the flows continue to rise, directly financing, as was mentioned, health, education, livelihood, and economic empowerment of those who receive them and their communities. This contribution must be recognized within the financing for development process, and we are, of course, very pleased to see that the current outcome document reflects some of the challenges and leveraging the potential of remittances, as well as commits to address them by reducing remittances transferring costs, by promoting digital remittance solutions, and improving access to transactions accounts for migrants, among other measures. But of course, the language could always be stronger by making the explicit link between the digital and financial inclusion of migrants. We have an opportunity in the coming days, and you as member states, to discuss this in the second intersections. We are, of course, we welcome, and especially we welcome this year the theme of the campaign of the International Day of Family Remittances of June, and thank you. I didn't know that you were behind the initiative at the beginning. So, and I think that it's fundamental that this year recognizes the development contribution of remittances and the diaspora investment, and it's very timely for our discussions. The campaign, as probably Pedro will say, is emphasizing the importance of the digital and financial inclusion of migrants and to maximize that potential. Financial inclusion, which is often provided digitally, and remittances are a virtuous cycle, one that embellishes the other. At IOM, at the International Organization for Migration, we work with the communities and we work at the receiving end. We promote the digital financial inclusion of both diaspora and remittances receiving communities to take advantage of lower cost remittances channels. Over the past year, our organization has worked to digitally and financially include diaspora communities in the UK who send remittances to East Africa, helping to reduce the sending costs to less than a half, to below the SDG target of 3%. Currently, we're also working with them to link remittances to financial services for both senders and receivers. At the same time, we're working with crowdfunding platforms to promote diaspora investment into infrastructure and business and community support. These examples show the additional development impact of linking remittances with financial inclusion, but we need to scale up. As we look forward to Seville, I'd like to emphasize the importance of operationalizing the commitments on remittances and diaspora investment. Let us work together to maximize the potential of these contributions to financing for development. Thank you again for being with us today and for the partnership and interest in this important topic. I wish that we have a fruitful conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Catalina, for those remarks. And allow me then to take the floor to contribute to those. Thanking again the Philippines and Guatemala and IOM for this next step in the campaign. What's behind this campaign is indeed, you mentioned there was a gap of $4 trillion. There's $4.3 trillion that will be sent before the end of the decade by migrants, $300 at a time. They will do that silently. We get very excited by the number, $4.5 trillion. That's not what they see. What matters for families, 800 million beneficiaries back home, is those small resources that come to support their daily needs. What we call their daily SDGs, but the needs that they have, and to sort of address their circle. And let me just illustrate what we call at IFAD the difference between the vicious and the virtuous circle. The vicious circle is very simple. It's the one that has been happening over and over, the lack of economic opportunities, and in many cases, due to climate shocks, pushes people to migrate, which in turn will be sending remittances to address needs, daily needs of their family. If this phenomenon is not leveraged, it just continues, and it expands to also young generation that will also make the choice to, actually more than the choice, will have to migrate to support their families and for themselves. And that vicious circle, unfortunately, keeps going. But there's a way of turning it into a virtuous one, which is by leveraging remittances, giving more financial options to those that send money back home and those that receive it. If they have more options to use, they can have a leverage on this. So reducing the cost might be something that shows a direction, but it is leveraging these flows by linking them with services such as savings, credit, insurance, tools that would allow them as an alternative to just having to pay cash. Being able to mobilize savings, getting credit will make you more resilient. And if you are more resilient to economic shocks as climate, you can then basically sustain yourself better, and therefore less need for remittances, and in the long run, less need for migration for you or the family members or the youth, the next generation coming in. And that's the virtuous circle that remittances can allow. It is not really a question of money, it's about providing better opportunities, more options to those involved in the remittances circle. Families are doing everything they can already. It is not their fault. We should not dictate, be more productive. They're doing really the best. They needed more options. They needed more support. And for that, private sector needs to bring their innovations. Digitalization does it. Be my guest, we need to promote more of that. And the governments and the public sector should just make it more easy. The understanding of remittances, etc. So for once, we have a problem that doesn't really require funding, $4 trillion gap, but a new way of looking at it. So this is, I think, what the campaign is about. It is not grabbing the funds to put it in development. They're already doing a lot, but it's how to leverage these resources by leveraging the people behind. And this, I think, goes to the point that this campaign is suggesting the 6 points that you can see in the brochure. Digital financial inclusion is really what it's all about. The people behind financial inclusion, as for IFAD, we believe is the greatest development impact that can be promoted. And through this, we empower millions of that fund. So digital and financial inclusion. But we also need to support, as you can see, and the brochures that you have, better competition and adaptable environment for that. So this is why we mentioned about digital technologies behind, but also an enabling environment that allows this to go to the families, better markets, of course, services. Remittance-linked financial services is not so common for many financial institutions. This is why it needs to be promoted. This is one of the things that IFAD is doing. Of course, partnerships. This is when you talk about reducing the cost, maybe a Ministry of Agriculture will say, this is not my problem. Ministry of Finance or Central Bank should tell me that. Yet, we realize that the part of remittances invested in agriculture is greater than any other income towards that end. So you need to really have a national approach to understand the sectors and who's involved in this. And this is still basically to be done, and partnerships in this regard is incredibly important, as illustrated here. One aspect never to mix, but it might be similar, is diaspora investment. As we know, a diaspora investor might also be a contributor to their families back home, but not always. But this is also an additional source that follows a different path, but yet has also great potential. It's estimated that $500 billion in savings in diaspora abroad is also potentially looking for investment opportunities, and that will be much more facilitated as it is right now. And last and not least, what we are working extremely hard in IFAD is on the linkage of remittances and diaspora investment as a catalyst for resilience in climate vulnerable communities. We are seeing that the biggest investors in climate resilience are remittance families. They just don't call it like that. But new irrigation systems in rural Mali are paid by the remittances, by the migrants abroad. And I can go on and on about examples of that. This needs to be expanded. I'm very proud. Yesterday, the IFAD board approved 2 projects in Central Asia that has the world record in terms of dependency on this flow, and namely Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan. And the project in Tajikistan is with a famous institution called FICA, is now expanding digital financial services to rural areas linked with financial and digital inclusion and literacy, and also providing products, digital products as well, but products that link credit for climate-related products, irrigation systems, solar panels, all that from the remittances. It's all in one. It just shows it works, and there's a market for it. And I make a pause after that. There is a market for it. This is not about providing resources, rent resources, to try to incentivize these things to happen. There is a market. So is there a lack of vision from service providers into the fact that there is markets in rural areas? So this is what this very small project is to prove. What you need is more uptake of this type of initiatives. In many other countries where remittances also represent what we call a criteria of more than 3% of GDP, you have a remittances opportunity. And if you go and check the table from the World Bank, the dialogue that shows you who has more than 3% of GDP comparison, then here you have your list where it matters. So with that, I would like to give the transition to my colleague of the Inter-American Dialogue, Mr. Dr. Manuel Orozco, The only problem with Manuel is he knows so much that we need to tell him to stop. But I think it will be. But I think Manuel here can give you and illustrate some of the important aspects after more than 2 decades experience in this field, particularly in Latin America, but also across the world. So without further ado, I would like to give him the floor to explain some of these ideas. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the introduction. It's a pleasure to be here with all of you, and to be with Guatemala and Philippines, two of my not my favorite countries, but countries I have a clear connection with. The Philippines, we have a very long-standing relationship since 1999, working on this issue particularly, and with Guatemala, we developed a very strong tie with operations in the country since 2006. But there are different ways to start using these 10 minutes that Pedro asked me to take advantage of. One is Ms. Davinda mentioned the issue of digital financial access. And Pedro also mentioned the fact that even today there are many financial institutions that still don't see this with clarity, the importance of remittances within the financial context. And this matters because it reminds you that nothing is static, that there is a lot of things that are dynamic, but still there are a lot of things that haven't changed. And I've been working on this subject for 30 years, and I feel like a preacher, the preacher of the remittance world and financial inclusion. Financial inclusion is not a subject matter of attractive intellectual interest, but it's a reality because it's the vehicle for economic independence. It provides the means, basically, to build assets. And remittances have become a critical component to it in the past 30 years. Today, we're talking about approximately 170 million households in the developing world, 80 million in Asia, nearly 40 million in Latin America and the Caribbean. Guatemala, for example, a country of 4.5 million households, has nearly 2 million households receiving remittances on a monthly, not even monthly by monthly, it's no longer monthly. Guatemalans remit 16 times a year money to their families, and in significant amounts. But what I want to do is just give you a characterization of the issue, and then offer you some of the illustrations of the policy interventions that work in the development context, and then some inputs for a development agenda on these matters. The key issue of the characterization is that remittances, basically what they do is increase disposable income. They add on top of the household income, the earnings that people have, they practically double it. Basically, if we think of the income dependence on remittances, it's about 60%. Those households that receive it, they receive $300 or $400 in remittances, their total income may be about $800. But that increases your disposable income, allows you to increase private consumption. In countries like the Philippines or Guatemala, at least 20% of nationwide private consumption is remittances. But it also allows you to increase savings. And this is the key element. The ability to increase savings is significant because more people are able to save among those who receive remittances, about 2/3. But also that the amount saved is at least double in quantity than the average of the country. The other important element is that 1/3 of the flows, at least even today, goes to rural areas. And this is critically important because it's tied to gender. 2/3 of remittance recipients are women, and those who are in rural areas who are women are actually finding remittances to be more than a lifeline, but the key vehicle to financial independence, because it allows you to save and think about yourself as an individual who can actually empower yourself to that money that you're setting aside little by little. Now comes the policy intervention. We have learned, I've been preaching financial access for 30 years. We started talking about democracia financiera, financial democracy. And then, we came up with the subject of financial inclusion. You have the GPFI, etc. And so you know the issue. Giving access to people to financial access. How do you do that? There is one key element has been technical assistance of providing financial institutions, credit unions, microfinance institutions, banking institutions, large and small, to craft financial products marketed to remittance recipients. It's not a specific differentiated product, but it's targeting that particular beneficiary of remittances. Because people pick up the remittance at the financial institution, but they don't have a savings account. So that marketing has worked. And there is plenty of experience along those lines, but the most important one, apart from opening savings accounts, relates to credit. Women are able to access credit when there is a marketing for it. And I mean, one key experience in a country that, we all think of negative stuff because it's really bad, is Haiti. But there are microfinance institutions like Foncose, for example, that provided access to credit in rural areas where electricity is a problem, and they operate on electric generators to process transaction payments. So there is also the other issue, which in my experience has been the most successful one in providing financial inclusion, is financial education. Financial advising really allows you to give you the means to inform people about financial products, but also to form you about financial management. And this is important because in our day-to-day life, we don't keep a written budget. And today, in the digital era, it's important to have everything in writing. But the financial advising has actually provided significant gateways for women in particular, but people in general, to manage their funds and capitalize on them through remittances. And our experience working in Guatemala, I'm not going to talk too much about the specific work in Guatemala. I left you some material there. But our experience in Guatemala points basically that providing financial advice on the spot allows you to formalize people on the spot, 1 out of 3 individuals. And these are mostly women. But we capture millions of dollars in small savings amounts of $500 on average on an annual basis. We work with economies of scale. You talk about scaling up. We work with 30,000 people a year, remittance recipients, formalized savings of 30% of them. And then those savings are mobilized into credit, into the local economy. And that credit goes to people who migrated and had returned. Women who need an additional source of income and borrow money to do so. The other important area where technical advice has been important is this digital integration into the financial ecosystem. What does that mean? It means basically that many of the financial institutions may have a digital product, mobile banking, for example, here. But the mobile banking is not really connected to the beneficiary, to the individual who has a savings account, because the savings accounts do not have connectivity to the digital payments ecosystem. The digital payment ecosystem is connected through the banking, through the checking account. But only 1 in 10 people have access to checking accounts. So providing that technical support to create that integration is one solution. And the other one, which is precisely pointing out to the dynamic changes of the global economy, is that money transfer companies today are not interested in charging high costs, high prices. Their interest is to sell the most efficient and affordable services to recipients. Any company today doesn't want to make money by increasing their prices. They want to make money by getting customers because they want to retain them. And today, one of the ways to save money for your operating costs is stablecoin. But access to stablecoin is not that easy. And allowing to have a clearinghouse exchange on the payout on the receiving financial institution that is going to pay remittances to also accept stablecoin is a technical challenge. It's not a financial product. It's that many times financial institutions don't understand where does cryptocurrency falls into the whole equation of financial payments. So what you see is that there are a number of issues where policy intervention plays a critical role. And there are plenty of lessons that show that it is possible to move forward. But the critical element continues to be that the remittances and the people who send it and receive it have become a critical player in global financial integration. I mean, if it wasn't because of remittances, the speed at which global payments in trade is taking place today wouldn't happen because of the flows of remittances, because it was money transfer companies, the ones that came out with alternative payment systems parallel to SWIFT, which takes 3 weeks to pay to enable settlements. Now it takes 3 days, but in real time you can make payments through Western Union, through Via Americas, Remitly, Gcash. I mean, Gcash, I remember when we started working with Gcash in 2006. It was a tiny little company that thought that, they were not going to make it. They started the mobile business. Now they are one of the most formidable players in the world in money transfer. So before I want to finish on one more point, which is regulation. There are a number of regulatory issues that need to be addressed on anti-money laundering, because the audacity of crime has no borders and has no barriers. And the way it happens through fraud, identity fraud in particular, has an effect on money laundering techniques. And even though remittance payments are, $500 are quite traceable amounts at the 99.9% level, there is always a fraction of people who actually take advantage of the system. So technical support and regulatory compliance is important, but it's also important to deal with oligopolistic tendencies, practices, antitrust in several countries. I mean, we have countries, Guatemala might be an example, where there are companies that basically establish contractual clauses preventing money transfer companies from seeking or expanding to other payers. And they lock you into paying with one particular partner, with one particular exchange rate. That's an issue of cost. And that's where you really need to think carefully about, when you talk about transaction costs, what is really, it's not that the company wants to make money, it's that somewhere in there is an antitrust practice that is not amenable to the financial system. So I think I'll start with that and leave the other 55 minutes for later.
Thank you, Manuel, for that, and to illustrate the diverse areas of engagement and opportunities around that. And this is why I think in the document it is essential to include the essential is not just about the cost. If you're really looking into it, it is where it all starts: financial inclusion around remittances, the ecosystem that resolves the enabling environment, and so on. But at the essence, it is really not to lose the north here as to where is it really important, and I think Manuel illustrated that. And again, this is not just some thoughts. Manuel, 30 years experience, the FFR has been doing this also for 20. The country, I mean, the donors of the FFR has been betting on this. The EC, Spain, Sweden, Luxembourg. We did more than 50 projects, 75 projects in 50 countries doing this. I personally remember the design of the Gcash project at that time in 2007 when it was very small. When it worked, everybody was talking about rural areas, financial services with a phone. And the old phones, right? Can we do that? And we see now, 20 years later, what it had become. So that I think is the illustration. It's moving ahead. Could it benefit from further support in terms of the innovation in the enabling environment, as Manuel was saying? Yes. And I think this is this whole point of the discussion and putting ground basic aspects in the document. So we still have 20 minutes. I would like this to leave and open the floor for questions or interventions on this. We don't have, I don't know if we had a list of already, but otherwise,
Thank you very
let's
much.
start like this. Right? If you can just introduce yourself, and if it is a question or a statement, you will.
Thank you. So, yes, Agata Wozniak from the European Union delegation. Maybe not as much as a statement, as an intervention, our reflection on and position and activities on the topic that I would like to briefly present. And thank you, of course, for this opportunity and for organizing. It's a very interesting event. The EU promotes the productive use of remittances through greater financial inclusion and literacy to meet the economic, social, and environmental challenges confronting low and middle income countries. Migrant remittances are transforming communities in many low and middle income countries and can be a significant source of income for families. What we have heard a lot about examples and how this can be transforming earlier today, especially when access to other financial instruments remain challenging. So receiving remittances usually positively impacts on financial inclusion, as it often leads to an increased demand for saving instruments. Households receiving remittances often have access to cash temporarily, prompting them to open bank accounts to store funds securely. This shift contributes to higher rates of bank account ownership and fostering financial inclusion. Furthermore, remittance flows can improve recipients' chances of obtaining loans from formal financial institutions, which may view remittance payments as a reliable indication of income, making lenders more willing to extend credit to these householders. Financial literacy, again, a topic, very important topic in the presentations earlier today. Initiatives can drive more effective use of remittances, promoting better financial habits and enabling access to formal financial services. Lack of financial literacy can lead to higher remittance transaction costs and poor management of funds received, thus limiting the economic benefits of remittances. Another very important element for successful financial inclusion is quality financial institutions and governance, as well as enabling domestic environments with partnerships between local banks and financial service providers, especially in rural areas. Poor institutional frameworks can hinder the benefits of remittances and discourage the use of formal financial services. In some countries, a substantial proportion of remittances is sent through informal channels due to high costs and barriers in the formal financial system. And this reliance on cash transfer can limit access to productive financial services and diminish the overall financial inclusion effect of remittances. Overall, the effectiveness of remittances in fostering financial inclusion depends on many factors, of course, such as starting from household behavior, institutional quality, and the regulatory environment governing financial services. The European Union is collaborating with IFAD to achieve some of these objectives through programs like Prime Africa of 15 million euros, Prime Central Asia for 6 million euros. And this year, the EU will launch, together with IFAD, a new action to maximize the impact of remittances and diaspora investments for enhancing climate resilience and adaptation. One of its objectives will be to achieve higher financial inclusion, particularly among women and other disadvantaged persons in rural climate-affected regions, through innovative, cost-effective business models and partnerships on remittances. The projects will include financial literacy training on budgeting, saving and investing remittance income, which are vital skills for achieving long-term financial independence and financial inclusion. And this international conference in Seville might be a good opportunity to present this project. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, and again, thank you for the support from the EC in identifying and testing these models over the years. This is super the EC that the financing facility for remittances was created. We have 15 minutes and we have a list of 7 interventions. So we're just going to try to go on that. I would like to give the floor to Sweden. Sweden/SIDA, correct? That we're going to.
That's right.
Okay. So, please.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for inviting to this event on a very, very critical topic. We know that the size of remittances is now largely exceeding ODA. So we're really seeing just by the portion of money being transferred to these communities, how can we ensure that they are really driving sustainable development and financial inclusion in the countries. I think what has been discussed today also is there needs to be a tighter connect between financing and development. We often also talk about that in the larger sense, like between the MDBs and the UN, but here also linking the financing flows with development and tightening the connect. One thing that I at least can reflect on is many countries, over 80 today, are developing their integrated financing, INFFs, integrated financing strategies. It's a financing strategy to ensure that all financing flows available in the countries are contributing to driving SDGs on country level and of course contributing on the global level. It would be great to discuss here today also how remittances come into the financial strategies of countries in that sense. We've been talking about strategies for financial inclusion, but I would like to also kind of see it in a broader sense and really making sure that how do we see that flow in connection to other flows, as well as being part of the broader country strategy, financing strategy. And maybe a last comment, and you said there is a market for it, and you reiterated that, but there is no need for more uptake. I think one point for discussion would really be how can we scale that market? What is needed to scale it? Some things have already come up, but it would be great to hear maybe also from Philippines and Guatemala what is needed for that scaling, and of course what can we do to enable that as a development partner. So thank you so much, and really hoping for the discussion on how we can make sure that remittances in a larger sense can drive sustainable development.
Thank you so much for those remarks. Next list I had Senegal. Oh,
From the OIC.
all right.
Senegal is also one of our members.
Okay.
We represent the Organization of Islamic Cooperation.
Yes.
We have 7 members. Yeah, and most of them are also from the low and medium economies. But then, of course, the peculiar thing about the OIC is that we have remittances are both ways, two-way. The outflow and the inflow. And then, of course, in terms of quantum also, we were able to record an amount of 195 billion in terms of personal remittances inflow, which is about 25% of the world remittances. And then in terms of the outflow, countries also like at national level, Saudi Arabia, they have also as huge as almost 35.5 billion. So, I mean, that's the idea of trying to put more emphasis on the welfare of migrant workers, foreign workers, and also ensure that there are policies to deepen financial inclusion and facilitate some institutions. Of course, the OIC also has other initiatives to ensure the inclusion, economic inclusion and financial inclusion of the members. That is in the area of food security, for example. We have tried to also upscale our halal food market to ensure that it's also very robust enough to stimulate economic production. And then we have our Baku office, which is dealing with labor issues, trying to ensure that countries have very robust regulatory measures to facilitate this. And of course, there are other funding mechanisms to ensure what's referred to as the resilience of the indigenous recipients of remittances. So these are some of the things that we are doing. I think we expect that we look forward to the outcome of your proposal and of course Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your words on this. Next on my list, so I'm not sure it is, but it is what we sent by email. We had Australia.
I didn't pre-plan for this, but I'm happy to say something.
Okay.
So my name's Maddie. I'm a member of the FFD4 delegation coming up from Canberra. I'll just preface this by saying we are holding a federal election on Saturday, so we are in caretaker at the moment, hopefully not next week for negotiations, but we will see. I mostly had a question. So one of the cornerstones of Australia's international development policy is our Pacific Australia Labour Mobility Scheme. So we engage with, I think, 10 Pacific countries as well as Timor-Leste and support labour migration to Australia. I think a lot of it is seasonal work. So the intention is that these migrant workers also return to their countries, taking back both their payments and then coming back for the next season so they can also be with their families and sort of connect to their culture, which I think is a great thing. But one of the aspects of working in Australia is forced retirement savings. So if you are an employee in Australia, at a minimum legislated 11% of your income goes into superannuation or retirement savings. I believe it's called different in different countries, but that is across the board, that is legislated. And I think one of the key challenges we are sort of facing now is how we move that superannuation funding back into the countries. And a lot of these migrant workers see this as and like it's a bucket of savings, right? For savings, and it's a good opportunity for investment, especially in property, especially as we talk about climate resilience in the Pacific as well. So, but trying to get superannuation funds to be able to transfer that to Pacific countries so that it can be used is a key challenge. So I'd be interested if you have any lessons learned in that space. I'll also would like to understand how we improve this digital inclusion and digital remittances when there's cultural challenges, I think, too. So in some of the Pacific countries, whether it's from a source of distrust or just preference, but a lot of remittances are moved in cash. And especially to rural areas, and in the Pacific, there's a series of islands, right? So that's being then moved by boat, moved by plane, and so that raises remittance costs as well. We need to be conscious so that we can't tell them, let's do this digitally, especially when there's poor access to digital services in rural areas. But any lessons learned in how to sort of deal with these differences in culture is really important as well. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And it is clear that we need 3 days just to address everything.
Apologies.
But you're making a point about that. And there's solutions for that. There's examples. It remains obviously an issue. We can also discuss about this. I'm suggesting also, since we have the list and your emails, also to answer some of these questions and examples, make some links to initiatives as well. But I think that would be very useful on that. I would love to discuss with you on this actually. So,
Sure. Thank you.
Next, I have Spain.
Thank you very much for inviting me. It's always a pleasure being here as long-standing partners of IFAD. And good morning, colleagues, excellencies, Vice Minister. Spain personally welcomes this timely and important discussion on the role of remittances in advancing sustainable development and poverty eradication. We thank Guatemala, the Philippines, and all partners here for keeping this crucial issue at the forefront of the FFD agenda. For Spain, remittances are not only private transfers, they are powerful enablers of development, financial inclusion, and economic resilience. Since its creation in 2006, Spain has proudly supported the financing facility for remittances at IFAD, contributing consistently over the years in order to empower millions of rural families. This is a growing priority for Spain's cooperation agency, IFAD, and we intend to further amplify this message by jointly publishing an op-ed with IFAD ahead of the International Day of Family Remittances on June 16th. Looking forward, Spain is to highlight three key priorities that have already been discussing today. First, reducing the cost of remittances to maximize their development impact. Second, strengthening the link between remittances and financial inclusion, particularly for women and youth. And third, enhancing data to better design inclusive and evidence-based policies. As we approach the 4th International Conference on Financing for Development that we are proud to host in Seville, we encourage a strong recognition of remittances as a dynamic and strategic force for sustainable development. Spain remains committed to working alongside with all partners to ensure that each remittance contributes to economic growth and economic resilience.
Thank you very much for your kind words. And just to say again, a lot of the findings that we're sharing today were able because of the contribution of Spain. On Australia, I wanted to say, Manuel mentioned the GPFI. That was a turning point during the G20 in 2014, where under the Australian presidency, an agenda on remittances was included. And it became clear that financial inclusion and remittances were connected and really the linkage to development. Just to address these 2 points. I have Cabo Verde. No, Ethiopia. That was another request that we had. Not then. I don't know who we have the floor open for. And then
Hi, I'm the Mission of Israel. Very, very quick question.
please.
And forgive my ignorance on the topic in general. Regarding banking, I was just wondering how much of an issue is in developed countries, at least many that I know of, bank accounts are insured by the government. How much of a reluctance is there in developing countries to put money into an institution that perhaps maybe is or is not guaranteed by the government, that, you know, as opposed to putting it in a, you know, keeping it physically with one. Just putting it out there. Now, it might be a very ignorant question, but
This is a challenge because many countries do not have the equivalent to, for example, the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation. Some countries have similar outfits that insure a fraction of the banking institution, not of the personal deposits. So this is a work in progress. It's a learning curve. Some countries just cannot afford it to do it. So it's a very good question. It's one that requires technical assistance to understand how to enable deposit to ensure deposits. But one priority that has emerged is the retirement funds globally. And the main partner on this, the main interesting party on this is actually the remittance business. Remittance companies have realized that it is to the benefit of senders to also send retirement deposits, cotizar su seguro, through the money transfer companies. And there is a growing number of relationships between governments and money transfer companies to integrate into the payment ecosystem the retirement funds. And this is not an alternative exactly to instead of, but it's a very good solution in the short term to insure some of your funds, at least through the social security system. And it's something that can be leveraged strategically when you talk about financing for development, motivating migrants. You talk about upscaling, 170 million transactions a month. Take a goal to ensure that 10% of that every year makes deposits into the insurance system, and that the international community matches those funds for development in their home countries. That would be a significant impact because it's a double one, and it has a significant effort. And just on the issue of informal fund transfers, if you allow me, it is an issue, not that very widespread. Also, the receiving cash, digital is not a zero-sum issue. People who use digital transfers also do cash transfers. They are not mutually exclusive. But what is important is to have the option on the one hand, and on the other hand, to provide the conceptual understanding, but also the financial tips of what happens when you have your money in a wallet. In our experience, people with a wallet or a bank account, a checking account, not a savings account, increases their disposable income by 15%. So if you had $100, you're going to have $115 at the end of the month because of holding money in your checking account. So financial education on the one hand, and not forcing people on the other hand to only use one sending method and receiving method is important.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And you make me think about the project that I just mentioned. Right now, there's not a single solution. There's not a signature that we can all pass to make it things nice. That doesn't exist. There's not one magic app. If anybody tries to sell the magic app that will do everything, that doesn't exist. It's a series of actions, of innovations together. The e-wallet, we've been promoting many, but then we also need a QR code for being able to make some payments in wallets, because if you cannot make any payment or cash it out, what's the point of having that? So it's different solutions. This is what we've been testing, what works or not. So you can tell the competition, that works, so more do it. And then Gcash is just not, for instance, one weird little institution trying to get into this, but it becomes what it becomes. But he's not alone, others follow suit. That, I think, is the whole system. This is where we are in 2025, with sadly some of the same issues as we were in the year 2000, but still with great potential and new innovations that can allow us to do better. I had a question from the back.
Oh, yes, I'm conscious of time. My name is Donald Coleman, I'm the Irish TPR, and for Ireland this is a very important issue. With such a long history of migration outwards and more recently inwards. I think we're the only country whose population is smaller today than it was in 1850, which shows you the extent to which our diaspora moved and the extent to which remittances were such an important part of our economic revival and growth and our development. I just wanted to have a small plug for the Global Diaspora Policy Alliance, which IOM has worked with us on. It's about getting diaspora, governments, stakeholders, private sector, civil society together to tackle issues such as this. It's great to see the FFD4 outcome with a strong representation on this issue as well. We need to follow through on that. To flag the INRF next year will be an important moment in that. So thank you, and great to hear the experiences of Guatemala, Philippines, and elsewhere. The question on the gender impacts, but I just flicked through this, and a lot of the great material there from Guatemala in terms of the importance of the underlying power dynamics of when cash comes into a family and the extent to which that can be managed at the household level, taking into account some of the gender dimensions of that. So thank you very much.
Thank you. And again, we would like just to create a WhatsApp group. It would be great. But otherwise, we have the email. So please shoot any emails and if you really want to get quick answers, you can put also your WhatsApp number, and we can share also some of the experiences on this. I don't know if there's. Yes.
Maybe just.
Hi, sorry. Yes, please go ahead.
My name is Per from IOM. I'm the director of IOM. Just to pick up on the question from Australia, having had the pleasure of being based in the Pacific for some time, there is a great initiative by the PIFs, the Pacific Island Forums Secretariat, and the member states of the Pacific on regional climate mobility, which was endorsed by the PIFs leaders last year in Tonga. Now, there are very interesting discussion on a regional labor mobility framework within the PIFs, which IOM and ILO and other agencies are supporting. And those discussions do include the importance of the labor schemes, Australia and New Zealand, and the links to remittances. So just to flag that that is a discussion that I know is going on. It's not at, I don't think it's going to be at this PIF leaders meeting, but it's at the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We're a bit over the time. I know that we have all the meetings at 10, but if there's no pending question, I would like to really thank you for the opportunity of exchanging some of the ideas here with us today. Of course, IOM, thank you for that. As always, Filipino Guatemala for taking the lead on this issue. We really hope for a good outcome in what was the G77 plus China and the EU policy have proposed. The text will believe that it nails it to the issue that it is beyond the cost, really, the linkage with development, particularly on the receiving end, financially inclusion. So thank you so much all for being here with us today.
Thank you very much.